And so that's how I became the health director. And I felt I was totally unqualified, but the way I got my mind around it was that memory of that couple that I'd consulted with. And the couple were quite a wealthy couple. They were used to top quality service, and I really felt that I was totally inadequate. But I wanted to help them because Michael said, you know, they're upset, they have driven 2 hours. And so that's what I did. I just used the laws. And you'll see in the questionnaire, it is basically about the laws of health. And as you go through the laws, you can go through, and what I find is you'll see, there's a problem here, they're not drinking in that much water, they're going to bed a bit late. There. So you'll see little keys like that. And you don't really have to say anything to them because they're about to hear where you lecture on the laws of health. And that's what my lectures were, the laws of health. They were very, very different to the lectures that I give now. And I'm so glad that you've got Barbara O'Neill's lectures that you can gain more of. And I wish I'd had them when I started. But I started very, very simple. And I had read the Ministry of Healing, and I'd also read Counsel on Diet and Food, and she gives some beautiful things in there. And I also had printouts of things that she had said. The fresh air is heaven's choicest blessing, and what I said this morning, the human body was designed for daily activity, and in that activity it's preserving power. You can't go wrong when you use that. And certainly as you go through the Bible, there are verses that you know, and the one I gave you on Ecclesiastes with the sunshine. Now with Australia, it's a very ungodly, very secular, and I found that they can cope if you say, an old proverb says, that they could cope with that. And just a little bit here and there. And so that's how we started. And I'm so glad that the first program was just one guest. So on the first evening, Michael would do an introduction. He would start talking because I found it very difficult. So he would bring me in and he would start asking me questions, and he'd get me talking, and then he'd leave. And that's how we started. So it's starting very, very simply. And yes, we had a facility, and you may not have a facility, but I presume the fact that you're interested in starting a health retreat, you have maybe a building, you maybe have a house. And I always think it's important to start where you are. So I'll tell you how Michael started. And how Michael started was he'd not long become an Adventist, and he was convicted of the health message. And his sister, who was a flight attendant, and she was 24, 25, he was about 28, she had pain in her stomach, and her stomach had blown up. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said they were going to have to take some of the colon out and give her a colostomy. And she was devastated. She's a very beautiful young woman, and she's a flight attendant, and she's got to have this. And Michael had heard about a health retreat. And so he said to her, let me take you to a health retreat, and we'll see what they can do. And she said, I'm not going there. She said, they're going to beat me over the head with the Bible, because it was a Christian health retreat. And he said to her, I'll come with you. So he came with her to protect her. And they did a couple of days juicing. Her stomach went right down. And one of the problems was the liver. I don't know if you're familiar with how flight attendants live. They have very little sleep. They have very poor quality sleep, sleep at wrong times. They don't drink much water at all. They nibble all day long, and they nibble where there's leftovers. You know, I mean, if some of the meals weren't taken by the passengers, they might eat that. It's a terrible lifestyle. And so her bowels weren't working very well, and the liver was inflamed because the bowels weren't working well. And so what they did was they did some compresses on her liver. They gave her some herbs for the liver. One of the best liver tonics, believe it or not, is the lemon. So they got her to drink the juice of a lemon in water, I think 3 times a day. And they juiced for several days. Her stomach went right down. They gave, I think they were doing the seawater, remember the isotonic solution? 2 litres of water, a third seawater, a third hot water and a third cold water. And that certainly can get the bowels going. By the end of the week, all her pain had gone. By the end of the week, her stomach had gone right down. And basically, she did never need the operation. And she's early 60s now and still going very well. So Michael attended this retreat and he's just watching. And so he went home and he said to his first wife, he said, "I'm starting a health retreat." He said, "This is amazing." He said, "I just watched the people, you know, people were getting well." And so how was he going to do that? Well, something happened to Michael. That idea sort of went a little bit quiet, and he bought a house and renovated it. His wife wanted to go to work, so he stayed at home with the 2 little children. And he thought, "Oh, I'm busy with my 2 little children. I'm sure God understands. I'll put the health retreat on hold." And he and his wife went down to an area where the grapes are grown and did grape picking. They used to make a nice amount of money by picking grapes for several weeks. While he was gone, he got the call. His house had just burnt to the ground. Everything lost. And when Michael said he went to the remains of his house, he looked at it and he made a decision right then and there that he was going to count this as the best thing that ever happened to him. So people had come up and say, "Michael, your house, you've lost everything." And he'd say, "No, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me." Yeah. And he really felt that God was saying to him, "I want you to start a health retreat." So now he had nothing. And the bank rang him up and said, "We noticed that you haven't begun what you've got to do to insure your house." And Michael said, "No, it's not insured." So he absolutely lost everything. But when he made that decision to consider this the best thing that had ever happened to him, and people would come up saying, "Michael, your house," he said, "No, this is very good. This is very good." And then he looked around to see what he could do. And he saw a house for sale for $2,000. Now this is, what are we looking at? We're looking at the 80s, and it's way out in the country. So he had made the first step and moved to the country, but he got very involved in his house. So he went to the people and said, $2,000? They said yes. And they said, "Look, we hope you don't mind, but we're going to leave everything in the house because we're travelling. We're going to go around Australia. We're just looking for a caravan." And Michael remembered seeing a caravan. So he went to the people in the house and he said, "You're selling a caravan?" They said, "Yes, but we've got a problem in the house. It needs to be rewired." Michael was an electrician. So he said, "I'll rewire your house, and can I have the caravan?" And they said, "Yes, yes," and it was a very nice caravan. So he rewired the house, got the caravan, and sold it to the people in a swap for the house. It was just, he said everything he touched that year went to gold. He believes it was because he obeyed God. And he thought, "I didn't start the health retreat when I had some means and a house, so I'm just going to start it." So what he did was he rented a little house for $10 a week, way out in the country. And the man said, "Look, it needs painting. If you paint it, then you don't have to pay the rent." And he supplied the paint. So he painted this little house, and then he put an ad in the paper, "Health Retreat."